Delivering electricity is an exercise in physical contrast. Supplying power to a densely packed urban block means low infrastructure costs and highly concentrated paying customers. But the moment you have to run lines across sprawling rural networks to reach isolated households, the cost of maintaining that copper wire skyrockets, while the revenue from those distant households significantly drops. This physical reality is the defining vulnerability of the Jharkhand Bijli Vitron Nigam Limited, or JBVNL. As the state-owned distribution company, they are tasked with maintaining a grid that is overwhelmingly dispersed, leaving them trapped by their own geography. This chart shows JBVNL's consumer base. 5.01 million domestic consumers account for 90% of total connections. Yet, despite requiring vast physical reach, these households consume only 54% of actual energy sold. This distorts finances across voltage levels. Power flowing through high-voltage commercial lines at the bottom is cheap to manage, but routing electricity into low-tension domestic lines, the wires reaching individual homes, carries the highest network cost at 1.62 rupees per kilowatt-hour. The utility is forced into a corner. Because the true cost of delivering power to remote households far exceeds what rural consumers can pay, JBVNL has to charge a steep premium to its high-voltage industrial clients. Those commercial users effectively subsidize the sheer sprawling weight of the domestic grid. To keep this fragile system running and legally collect payments from customers, JBVNL must file a multi-year tariff petition. They submit their operational expenses, capital investments, and projected losses to the state for review. But the state regulator, the Jharkhand State Electricity Regulatory Commission, does not exist to rubber stamp the utility's budget. Their mandate is to act as an adversarial auditor. We are going to audit JBVNL's current multi-year petition step by step. By tracking the exact math the regulators use, we can see how an administrative firewall scrubs billions of rupees in operational inefficiencies from the utility's ledger, stopping those costs before they ever reach the consumer. The entire battle revolves around a single financial ledger, the Aggregate Revenue Requirement, or ARR. This is the master calculation of every allowable expense the utility incurs over the year, and it directly dictates the final price of electricity. Every kilowatt-hour on a consumer's bill is priced according to a theoretical ideal, a calculation of what a highly efficient version of JBVNL should have spent, rather than a simple reimbursement of their actual historical costs. This regulatory prudence check table is the roadmap used to dismantle the utility's claims, comparing what JBVNL asked for against what the state actually approved. Regulators immediately throw out JBVNL's aggressively high estimates for energy demand, capping growth projections tightly to historical averages. This Sankey diagram tracks where the massive volume of bulk power purchased from central and state generators flows. But as energy travels through the grid, it bleeds out. Some is lost in interstate transit, and a massive chunk is lost purely to local distribution. Before the state calculates a single rupee of tariff, they must strictly bound this physical reality. If the regulator doesn't lock down exactly how much power is allowed to vanish, the utility has a blank check to overpurchase energy. JBVNL claims a staggering 28% distribution loss, blaming their rural base and harsh terrain. The regulator completely rejects this, enforcing a hard cap of 13%. This efficiency discrepancy translates into a massive penalty, stripping 1,381 crore rupees straight off JBVNL's books. This is the core regulatory mechanism at work. By refusing to cover the cost of stolen power or leaking lines, the state forces the utility to internalize the financial impact of its own operational gap. The ratepayer is shielded any inefficiency falling outside the strict performance mandate. Looking at the AAR waterfall, the ledger stacks base power costs, operations, and depreciation to calculate the gross budget. Applying strict efficiency metrics, the state cleanly slices 1,834 crore rupees directly off the top of the utility's requested budget. And the regulators don't stop at physical power losses. They apply the same ruthless mathematics to the utility's administrative overhead. This chart shows projected employee and maintenance cost growth. The regulator ignores the utility's actual administrative spending. Instead, they lock O&M growth to a strict inflation cap tied to price indexes, making systemic cost bloating mathematically impossible. The final safeguard limits physical infrastructure spending. To prevent JBVNL from dumping the costs of massive grid upgrades onto ratepayers all at once, the Commission strictly limits their base year capitalization rate to 50.28%. The regulatory firewall does exactly what it was designed to do. It aggressively scrubs the ledger, ensuring that the final rate you pay is determined only by the costs of a theoretically perfect, highly optimized grid. But here is the terrifying macro reality. Even with the regulator perfectly excising operational bloat from the ledger, the geographic trap remains. Because they are legally required to serve millions of remote, low-revenue households, the utility is still bleeding cash on every unit of power they deliver. Here is the financial fallout. Year after year, the revenue gap plunges deeper into the negative. Borrowing to bridge this gap triggers an 11% regulatory interest penalty, a compounding cycle driving the cumulative deficit down to an astonishing 16,543 crore rupees by 2031. This is a true mathematical death spiral. A deficit of this magnitude cannot be erased by simply hiking consumer power rates, because raising prices fast enough to close a 16,000 crore gap would immediately crash the local industrial economy. With tariffs tapped out, the regulator pulls one final lever: non-negotiable mandates for systemic grid modernization. First, an aggressive transition to prepaid smart metering. This bypasses human billing errors, collection failures, and standardizes revenue from the massive domestic base. Physical upgrades are useless without basic data hygiene. Independent audits flag severe governance risks, noting JBVNL's consumer security deposit ledgers are barely 64% complete. The regulator mandates 100% account reconciliation to stop money bleeding through bad paperwork. Finally, the state locks the utility into a rigid loss reduction trajectory, enforcing a hard, non-negotiable drop to a 15% total commercial and technical loss rate by 2030. A modern grid is as much a product of adversarial mathematics as it is of copper and concrete. This regulatory framework acts as the final arbiter, balancing a utility's financial survival against the relentless requirement of consumer protection.